Greg, I expected them to be absolutely vicious, and they were only a little bit vicious. It wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. Joy Behar even said during the break, not joking, she said, "You know what? You're like pretty good for a Republican." And I was like, whoa, that is a way better compliment than I expected from Joy Behar. I got to say, I thought that Sunny, the woman to my left, was going to call me a racist. In reality, it was Whoopi, the woman to my right, who called me a racist. So expectations were defied.
Down with a joke. I thought it was pretty good that his press team told him that this was a table of MAGA Republicans.
Yeah, that was funny.
All right, let's get into your... and then apparently I'm getting a note here. You told him during the break that he should run for president because he has a good vibe.
I think that even though, for a Republican, mind you, I'm not a Republican.
Yes, you're not turning.
I think possibly I voted for Michael Bloomberg once for mayor, who was supposedly...
you always liked Bloomberg.
Supposedly he was a Republican. I don't mind a Republican on the city level because it needs a little discipline. But on the national level, I want somebody with a good heart. And those are more in the Democratic Party, in my opinion. They care about the poor. They help people. The Republican Party is much more about saving taxes for rich people. So I'm not a Republican.
So we got to talk about some more praise for Vice President J.D. Vance, who is starting to look more and more and more presidential in his own way, okay, as he takes on the responsibility of trying to execute on this alleged memorandum of understanding between Iran and the United States, and apparently Lebanon as well too, which is already turning out to be an issue. But the task here is to try to get to a final peace agreement. Now, whether or not this is actually going to happen, I don't know, right? There's already some fireworks. There's already news about how Iran is upset and mad because the attacks in Lebanon allegedly haven't stopped. A lot of this stuff is fragile. I expect volatility, okay? But as always, I am cautiously optimistic until a final conclusion, right? If we get a final conclusion. But until then, we have J.D. Vance leading the charge and, again, showing us that, hey, you know, this is something that we could possibly see going into 2028 and beyond, right? If JD is chosen as the successor to President Trump. Take a look.
First of all, I want to thank the President of the United States, who sends his best to all the great leaders assembled here, because he's empowered us to find a diplomatic resolution to a host of issues that matter to the American people, but I think the world. The opening of the Strait of Hormuz, the ending of the Iranian nuclear program, all of these things have already been accomplished. The question before us now is how much more can we accomplish together? Can we turn over a new leaf? Can we change relations in the Middle East permanently? Or do we go back to doing things the old way, which is not our preference, but is certainly very much something that can happen. I think it's important for the American people, but people all over the world to appreciate that what's brought us to this moment is the President's leadership and the President's willingness to see a Middle East that is much different 10 years from now than it was 10 years ago. And what we're trying to accomplish here is something very simple. Through diplomacy, through working together to transform the Middle East, where Iran and the Gulf have been at war with each other, or at least have had very unfriendly relations, where Iran has been a driver of regional instability. Now we see a future where everybody can work together to promote peace and prosperity for everyone. What we have already seen back home in the United States is lower gas prices. We've seen the free flow of oil and gas. We've seen peace. And now we're trying to build on that to see if we can build something even better and more sustainable for the future. This is a historic meeting. Never before, outside of Islamabad and here, so outside the last few months, never before has the Iranian and American leadership met at such a high level. What the President has asked us to do is turn over a new leaf, to transform our relationship with the people of Iran and to extend an outstretched hand that says to the people of Iran that if your leadership is willing to give up being a driver of regional instability, if they are willing to give up nuclear weapons ambitions for the long term, then the United States is willing to fundamentally transform our relationship with that country.
Yeah, so you see that, you heard that. Again, JD, looking presidential, sounding presidential, and having an opportunity to execute on this deal, okay, this peace deal. We're going to see, again, what happens. Obviously, there's going to be volatility, and I just want to caution people that you should not react prematurely to the volatility that's going to come out of the negotiations, because remember, every action is a negotiation, right? When you talk about negotiations, everything that they do is a negotiation, okay? Everybody's trying to maintain leverage. So, of course, you're going to see a whole lot of shenanigans and chaos, volatility as a result of the fact that this has now become a meat swinging contest, right? That's what these negotiations have become, okay? So, you know, we're going to see what happens. But he is getting praised. JD Vance is getting praised for the way that he has conducted himself, talking to the media, speaking to the media, trying to present this deal for the last week or so. He's getting this praise on CNN of all places. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this.
As an aside, the glow up of JD Vance for this is pretty impressive. The tan, the trimness, the sharp suits. I just want to note, you know, he is presenting himself in a very glowed up fashion.
Like a beast of a week. I mean, he's performed really well with tough interviews over and over and over again. I mean, just to watch that piece of it is an amazing piece of endurance.
He's great in interviews. I've interviewed him, and he is great in interviews. He is an able communicator. He communicates on many levels. That is one of his strong suits.
I give him credit for...
Yeah, and this is something I've said about JD for a while now, right? I think he is the best communicator when you talk about a potential successor to President Trump, when you talk about who could possibly win the Republican primary in 2028. Yeah, I think that JD is the best communicator. I think that's his biggest strength. However, what JD lacks, in my opinion, is execution experience. He was a senator. He's never been a governor. So he doesn't really have executive experience. The VP job is his first major executive job. And again, this is an opportunity for him to show that he has what it takes to be an executive, right? And that's why I am hoping for success when it comes to this peace deal, because ultimately, you know, if it's successful, then it will skyrocket JD when it comes to his presidential ambitions, okay? And I think that is a good thing, along with Marco Rubio as well, too, who I think right now most people agree is the front runner. And I think the thing about Marco, the advantage that he has over basically everybody else is that he has execution experience and he's a great communicator. I think DeSantis, who I also like, he's a great executive, okay? But I think his communication skills might leave a little bit more to be desired when you compare them to JD Vance and Marco Rubio. So I think that JD is the best communicator. Ron DeSantis is the best executive, and I think Marco Rubio presents the best of both worlds, to be honest with you. But again, they're highlighting something that I've been talking about a lot when it comes to JD, which is that his strongest attribute is his ability to communicate.
For going on The View. This is foreign territory for him, and I don't know that I would have advised that of most leaders to go into what's probably going to be a hostile environment.
It was tough territory for your former boss.
Absolutely,
right?
yeah.
But so I think he performed very well for
the
that.
fact that he was able to do it does say something about his performance as a political actor.
Well, he didn't screw up, and that was the important
Let's listen
thing.
to a little bit of it so we can talk a little bit more around it. Here's what he said as part of that interview.
The president knows that a lot of Americans are struggling. In fact, he ran on that. He talked about it, and we've done some things and made some good progress on that point.
He just said he loves the inflation.
What he said, Anna, what he said is that he loves the fact that the inflation is going to come down when this war is over. That's what he said.
That's not what he said.
That wasn't a direct.
Are you his interpreter or are you his vice president? Come on.
Do you think he's successfully defending the president?
Yeah, I'm gonna dissent from all.
Yeah, so before this guy gets into this, right, I just want to say this. I think Bill O'Reilly said this, and I think it's very true about President Trump, okay? President Trump does not speak in sentences. He speaks in paragraphs, right? So the media likes to take what President Trump says out of context to spin it into something that is not. I think what JD said was actually accurate, right? In the sense that the president clearly, in context of what he was saying, was that, hey, this war, this conflict coming to an end means that it is likely that inflation is going to go down, right? This is not the type of inflation that we saw under Joe Biden, right, and Kamala Harris, where it's like, okay, well, this inflation has a clear cause that can be addressed in a quick way, right, that is not painful, right? Joe Biden's inflation had to be addressed with raising interest rates, and that was very, very, very painful. This inflation can be addressed by simply opening up the Strait of Hormuz, or put it this way, Iran to stop threatening ships passing through the Strait of Hormuz, and getting the energy markets back on track, right? Because there's perceived supply disruptions as a result of what's happening in the Strait. Yeah, once you fix that problem, then you should see the inflation numbers go back down to where they were before this conflict began, which they were basically hovering around 2%, the Fed's goal. So I think that is why President Trump said what he said, right? In the sense that this is the type of inflation that we know we can address this pretty quickly, right? Just by ending this conflict. And I think that's what he was saying. That's the point he was making, clearly. But the media took a small portion of it, right? And they spent it out of context and then tried to use it as a gotcha against JD Vance. And clearly, he wasn't having it, right? He didn't fall for the gotcha here.
All of you guys from this
Like dissenting opinion.
Vance Admiration Society. That clip, dozens of other clips, demonstrate one of the biggest problems with J.D. Vance is that he's always good at winning an argument when he is fighting a straw man, when he's lying about the facts, when he is creating, when he's working on a false premise. He said at that press conference yesterday that all of these members of the Israeli cabinet attacked Trump personally. That was a lie. He said he characterized the supporters of the war who had the exact same position as Donald Trump as of 2 weeks ago as not being would not be happy unless every Iranian died and every last bomb was dropped. He demonized.
Well, I mean, let's be real, right? Let's be real. There are some hardliners who actually do feel that way, right? They actually do feel like, okay, you know, we gotta do a ground invasion of Iran. We have to legitimately destroy the country in order to accomplish the objective of regime change. And that's probably accurate, to be honest with you, right? But that's also why this peace deal, hopefully, you know, we get this instead of the alternative, because the alternative really is to continue the bombing, to continue the conflict. And if you actually really want real regime change, the country is going to have to be invaded, right? You're going to have boots on the ground. You can't get around that. But the unfortunate reality is, right, for a lot of these hardliners, that is that we don't have the political support, right, in the United States for a ground invasion. It's just not going to happen, right? The American people would not stomach it, right? There's just not the support. So there's not going to be a ground invasion. But a lot of these people who are so, again, hardline on this issue of Iran, we're not going to bomb them into regime change. Clearly, that didn't work, okay, over the past few months. It's going to take a real ground invasion and occupation of the country. There was no rising up of the masses to take on the regime, which I think that's what they thought would happen, right? That there would be somebody else who would actually do the dirty work on the ground, whether that be the Iranians, whether that be, I don't know, the Kurds or whatever group that's in the region that can actually take on the IRGC, okay, with our help, that is willing to do the dirty groundwork, right, of occupying and ruling Iran, okay, as long as they're friendly with us, okay, that's what we care about the most. Yeah, I think that JD is saying, look, instead of going that route, which clearly we weren't able to bomb them into regime change, okay? However, we did damage them a lot, okay? Let's not get it twisted. We utterly defeated Iran militarily, which is why they have moved to threaten the Strait, is because they don't have any other form of leverage outside of that, right? They've been defeated militarily. JD is saying, hey, instead of continuing the economic warfare that's really just hurting both countries in the world, let's try diplomacy, right? Let's try diplomacy. Let's see if diplomacy can work. And if diplomacy doesn't work, then we go back to warfare, right? But let's, again, try, at least with diplomacy, and not continue to hurt the world's economy unnecessarily if we can get it done without dropping more bombs. Now, again, I'm not opposed to dropping more bombs, right? I think that option should always be on the table. But I think people got to understand that, you know, if the goal is regime change, I don't think it can be done without forces on the ground. And I don't think that the public, okay, is willing to stomach that, which is why it's realistically not an option. The most realistic option, the most practical solution is diplomacy and to work out some deal with the Iranians. Again, will they uphold their end of the deal? I don't know. It seems to me that this whole Lebanon thing is a problem. It's an issue because you have a party that's not really involved with, you know, the fighting between the U.S. and Iran being a part of the deal, right? And that is Iran using that as an excuse to not uphold their end of the deal. So I don't know. I think that Iran wants us to show that we can keep Israel on a leash. And I think that's what's happening here. And it's just a big cluster F, right? So it seems.
Realistic. Are you ready to stop genocide in Lebanon? As you know, your alignment, Israel has something like genocide in Lebanon. The main issue is stopping this.
Well, ma'am, I think that the President of the United States and the United States of America have done more to stop the conflict in Lebanon than any government anywhere in the world over the last few months, and we're going to keep on working towards it. As I think a lot of you appreciate, peace is never easy. Peace always requires a little bit of work. It always requires a little bit of give and take. But the President of the United States is committed not just to peace between the United States and Iran. The President is committed to a regional peace, which is why we're here working so hard to settle our issues.
But, again, I am cautiously optimistic that it will work itself out. Again, a lot of this is a penis swinging contest. It's all a part of negotiation, to be honest with you.
He characterizes people in his own coalition and supporters of the president, never mind everybody else, going back to his days about, you know, admitting that he was going to lie about eating the dogs and eating the cats. And people mistake it as him being this brilliant debater and this brilliant communicator. I think it comes back and bites him in the butt.
Yeah, we're going to see about that, right? We're going to see. It's going to depend on the success of this Iran deal, right? If there is a deal, if they ever come to a final deal, we're going to see, right? Regardless, I have faith that JD can get it done, right? I am rooting for JD. I am cautiously optimistic. I've heard people compare this assignment for JD to Kamala Harris and the border, right? Kamala Harris being the border czar. I think the difference is that JD actually has some chance of success, right? I think Kamala was doomed to fail on the border from the start because she's pro-open borders, right? The far left makes it so Democrats cannot be pro-closing the border, right, or against mass illegal immigration to the country. So, again, she was always destined to fail at that job, okay? JD, on the other hand, I think that he can work this out, right? I think that he's saying what he needs to say in order to try to get this peace agreement to stick. But who knows, right? I mean, it's a work in progress. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. People got to be patient, and people got to understand that there's going to be a lot of volatility. There's going to be a lot of volatility when it comes to this stuff, and that's just kind of how it goes, right? But regardless, again, JD is impressing some of the people in the liberal media with the way that he's conducting himself and the way that he's handling these interviews. Again, he certainly is looking presidential. We're going to see if that's going to be enough to take back some of the momentum from Marco Rubio, who right now I believe is the front runner. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.